Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our channel today. Welcome to Being Brasian. This is episode 1, and today we're going to be talking about beauty. One of the first things that we wanted to talk about, what is our experience of the Asian beauty standard?
I can jump in about my experience. So growing up in the Filipino culture, I think it's probably a shared thing with all our kind of backgrounds. There's an ideal of being kind of diminutive and pale and an archetypal kind of ideal of what it is to be an Asian. And for Filipinos, I've always been a bit taller. I've always, I've not held back eating food. So I don't think I've ever kind of fit into that mold. And every time, it's been a while since I've been to the Philippines, and every time I went back, okay, don't get any bigger than you are now. Well, what's wrong with my size now? So I think kind of personally for myself, the focus on size is a big thing, and also like an accepted thing. It's okay to say, hi, you're big, and actually that doesn't do well for a young person's self-esteem or how you view yourself. And perhaps growing up in a Western culture, culturally that's not acceptable for me, for anyone, because obviously you love where you come from. You've got that kind of antagonism because this is where my family comes from, and this is how they communicate in a certain way, and it's not done in a malicious way, but it's of the culture. So it's kind of, I guess, that antagonism in a way. Yeah, I think that's something that I certainly feel is kind of the size being an issue.
I definitely agree with you, Tracy. I think that one of those things is really around the idea of we should be of a certain size. Especially when I go to Thailand, I get the same experience. A lot of people will say, you're looking well. Exactly what you said. You do feel that what they believe an Asian person should look like, you feel kind of different. And I think the struggle is that we were born in the UK, and so we were brought up in a certain way, a certain Western diet as well, which I always find quite interesting, because I think people don't realize that we're not eating the same foods that, well, we would be eating if we were living in those countries. So I think that I agree with you. One of the other things that I think as well is I always get the fact that I'm darker than a lot of Oriental people. I guess the idea of being around sort of a darker skinned Oriental, I always feel that I go back and I'm not seen as beautiful because I'm darker. And that is always something that sort of, I guess, bothers me a bit. I feel like that, why are we being judged for what shade that we are? We're all Oriental, but yet we are still judged by our fellow Oriental people for telling us that we don't fit into that beauty standard.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is obviously very similar to what you both said. Again, the slim thing. In South Korea, they're obsessed with being skinny, but particularly I think it's a problem in the capital, in Seoul, because when you branch out into other areas or the countryside, it's not so much of an emphasis on it. Whereas in the capital, everyone, I'm sorry to say, looks like clones of one another. Not only because they're all really skinny, they look like they haven't had a decent meal in about a month. And also, a lot of people have obviously plastic surgery. So it's now become so common for people to have plastic surgery, like during even lunch breaks, mini procedures where, it goes undetected. Girls are getting surgery younger and younger and younger because they're seeing other people around them. They're seeing what's on the TV and their idols. And, K-pop is so famous and they want to strive to look like these dolls, essentially, or in a way, unhuman beings. So there's no kind of realistic or realism of what beauty is out there. And in terms of like facial structure, I would say that definitely like pointy chin, narrow oval face, pointy chin, big eyes. So you need the double eyelid. That's a must. So double eyelid surgery, as you can imagine, is very, very popular in Korea, as is a nose surgery. They don't like the flat nose. They want it protruding in a way, and prominent nose. And now I've noticed a new trend of girls getting collagen in their lips, which didn't really used to be a thing a few years back. It's very much like, I heard, if you go into the plastic surgeon's office or clinic, whatever you want to call it, there's say like 4 images and you say, I want to look like number 1 or I want to look like number 4. And it's almost like that beauty template rather than, embracing what you look like, and embracing, you know, this is me. I want to make the best of me and emphasize what I have, my own natural beauty. But definitely weight is an issue as well. I used to be quite slim. As I've grown older, I can't be bothered with it anymore. And like Tracy, I absolutely love food. So now, before even hello Deborah, how are you? It's been a long time. Nice to see you. Oh, you've gained weight. And that's instead of a hello. But unlike you, Amra, it's not like, oh, you look well. It's just judgmental. So it's like, oh, you look fat, or you've gained weight. And in Korea, it's not as rude as it were if you were to say that in the Western world. But still, you know, for me, having been raised in a Western culture, it's still quite impactful and quite shocking at times, sometimes obviously hurtful, but that's their Asian standard of beauty, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was just going to jump in about your other point about kind of skin color and that feeling of kind of otherism because you're not this standard of pale. Like, I was thinking kind of like, I don't have that many Filipino makeup products purely just because I haven't been back for a long time, and also kind of who I see. My cousin, when she went back, brought me some Sunny's Face, and I was thinking, oh, what type of beauty did my mum kind of instill in me? And my first memory, or my first thing that jumps to mind, and you know, if you share this too, is that kind of whitening soap to kind of lighten your skin. Looking back at it now, I'm just like, why would you want a child to have this? And in terms of kind of growing up in Britain and then going back to the Philippines, I mean, in comparison to my cousins, I'm far paler, so like I didn't particularly need it, you know, but my mum was like, oh, you know, this is something that's going to make it. And it's not like there's no health skin properties, it's purely a product designed to make you look fairer. And why? Because that's considered as prettier, or the standard, or what we should all attain to. And let's face it, it's about looking far more Western, like you were saying, Deborah, about, you know, noses protruding, having this kind of angular Western feature. And it's like, hang on, what's wrong with our features? Our features are beautiful. Our features
absolutely
are gorgeous. So I think, you're saying about Amber, that spoke to me about kind of like the levels of skin shades and kind of within our own cultures and our own backgrounds, how even when we come back, or if people see us from kind of like back home or our family, you know, they see us as this kind of other, you know. So I just thought, that there's the skin color is quite an important thing to kind of discuss and delve into.
Yeah, and one of the things in Thailand, which I really think is just silly, really, is that if you're darker skin toned and, you know, you're Thai but you're darker skin toned, they consider you to be poor, which is really bizarre. If you're rich, you live in the city, which is what Deborah was saying, you know, in Bangkok, you will have less sun, so your skin will be paler, therefore you're rich enough to not be in the sun, if you know what I mean. But if you're poorer, then it's because you're on the paddy fields, they say,
exactly.
you know. And so that's why. And it's interesting because in Western culture, our skin, darker skin tone, is actually what people strive to be. They suntan, they want to be like darker, whereas in sort of, it's really interesting in Asian culture, you know, you're seen as prettier if you're lighter.
It's true. It's so true. And like I heard of that as well, where if you're darker, it's like back in the days you were like a peasant who worked on the fields, and that's why it's like your skin color was your status.
That's it.
And if you were rich, you were paler because you never had to work on the fields, like he said, and you were always indoors being chaperoned everywhere. I 100% agree with that. And it's interesting, Tracy, that you touched upon Filipino makeup, because even with Korean makeup, I love Korean makeup. And, you know, Korean makeup has really seen a boom over the last few years, particularly skincare. But there are so many choices in terms of Korean makeup. And I will always like go crazy with the lip products and the eyeshadows, etc. But when it comes to foundations, it's literally like white, slightly warmer white, porcelain, slightly warmer porcelain. And I just feel like it's very hard to find a foundation shade that works for me, to the point where I would have the warmer skin tone. And also it's interesting how, you know, English foundations have like minimum either no SPF or minimum 15, max 30, whereas in Asia it's almost considered a minimum to have 50 and plus, or 30 something and plus. And again, it goes back to the tying in of, we don't want to get darker, we don't want to get tanned, which is a myth, because with SPF you don't not tan, it's just supposed to protect your skin from sun damage. So
definitely tying into the foundation thing that you mentioned, Deborah, is here's a key example. I was really interested in, very similar to what you get in Korea, the cushion makeup, and it was from Dior. And I remember asking them, they brought it to the UK, and I said to them, how many shades do you have? And they said four shades. And I was just like, really? 4 shades? And they were like, yeah, it was really popular in, in the Oriental market, but we decided to bring it over to the UK. And I said, well, if you were going to bring it over the UK, why didn't you expand your color range? So I totally
Exactly.
understand what you're saying there.
And on that note, with brands, whilst we're naming and shaming, Clé
Yeah.
de Peau, as you know, are a Japanese brand.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I remember seeing them at the airport. I think it was either in Malaysia or Singapore, whereas you wouldn't get it in the airport here. And Clé de Peau is super expensive. So
It
any
is.
form of a discount, I was like, I'm going to get that discount.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I went to the foundation section, the lady was helping me with my shades. And honestly, like you said, Amra, I think there was only like 4 or 5 shades, and I was the warmest shade. And I said to
Wow.
her, this is not diverse at all. How is this inclusive? There are firstly, 4 or 5 shades is not good enough.
No.
But then if I'm the deepest shade,
Yeah,
that's
a
really
worry.
worrying.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it ties in very well with our next question, which is what was your experience growing up in a Western culture and having Asian looks and features?
As you know, you ladies know, I recently posted a little thing on Instagram about my experiences of growing up, especially growing up as a Oriental looking girl in a Western culture, and very much was made to feel very, very ugly at a young age. There was no one that looked like me, no one that had my features. So often the emphasis was on my eyes, and questions like, kids can be so blunt and mean. Why are your eyes so small? Why are your eyes that shape? That turned into high school, like, oh my God, I find it so fascinating that you can manage to draw an eyeliner on such small eyes. It's amazing, So very much from a young age made to feel really like the ugly duckling. I hated myself. I hated the fact that I was a Korean Asian girl living in Britain. And literally, sometimes I would manage to forget because I obviously had only English friends. My main language is English. Growing up in this culture, I would almost forget that I was Korean, or outwardly anyway. And all it would take was one racist comment to bring me back down to earth, like chinky, or you chink, or go back to your country. And I would go home and look at myself in the mirror and almost be shocked at the face that was staring back at me. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I'm not white. I'm not Caucasian. So it was really, really tough. That added with eczema. I had severe eczema growing up. Still have eczema, but it's obviously improved. It really knocked my confidence so much. So it was a real struggle growing up personally when I was younger. I don't know if you ladies can relate.
I had very similar experience at school. People would, put their hands or do the thing with the eyes, and they would say, go back to your own country. And I remember going back to my mum and saying, well, where am I supposed to go? I was born here. I'm British. I don't really know where I'm meant to go. And I always found, like what Deborah said, I was always straddling 2 cultures. I was born British. I would have friends who wouldn't really see the color of my skin. They just saw me for me. And then I would struggle with that when someone would say something and then would just take me back. And I would then look at myself and go, well, actually, I am British, but I'm not, because I don't look like someone that is British. In my eyes, someone that's British is someone who's white or Western. I think growing up, because you look a certain way, that struggle.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Kind of what me growing up, I grew up in the 80s in Camden, and I went to a very kind of bohemian school. I was really fortunate, I guess, that I got to see a lot of cultures growing up. I was always aware that I was kind of like only Filipino in my class, but I got to see other cultures. So I guess from my point of view of being young and being, say, at school, I was part of a kind of a very multicultural, and that is something I'm going to be forever grateful for. But yeah, when you kind of come out of that bubble of, like you said, both of you said, kind of like your friends or the people who kind of see you for who you are, as opposed to the color of your skin or just make a snap judgment on you, that's when it kind of brings it back to earth. You kind of like, well, actually, no, I was born here. I was born in, Surrey, of all places. But then, grew up in Amden, which was very kind of diverse, and it was the 80s. So it was just kind of, I would walk home and there would be like Camden Lock and, punks and such kind of vibrancy. And then we moved out of London in my secondary school age. That kind of closed the pool of diversity slightly. But again, I was really fortunate. I had a best friend at the time who was Filipino. Somehow we found each other. But yeah, very much we were the only 2. And that, again, very lucky to have that. I guess in terms of kind of who I gravitated to as friends, I was lucky to have a mixture of Caucasian, Filipino, Black. I was lucky in that respect. It's when you kind of come out of that bubble. I just thought this whole channel was so important, especially now. The decisions we're making about people of a kind of Asian descent now.
I mean, I think growing up, I definitely acknowledge more that I'm different. When I was younger, I had a lot of, like you said, Tracy, my friends were all from everywhere. My school was in East London. It was very
Mhm.
multicultural. There was only like one or two white people in my school, to be honest. It
Wow.
was mainly ethnic
Mm.
minorities. When I notice it more that I don't look like everyone else is when I go outside of London, actually.
Mm.
So if I do trips to like the Lake District, or I go outside of what we call London and all the ethnic minorities are mainly in London, that's when I notice that people
Yeah.
stare at me. The amount of times I've gone into a
Right.
pub
Mm.
and outside of London and the whole pub would just turn and look at me.
Yes, true.
It's so
Yeah.
bizarre. But I'll turn to my husband and I'll say, "Did you see that? Did you see them
Mm.
all look at me?" He'll get it, but
Yeah.
I know that look. So there's a
Mm.
certain look that I'll get
Yeah.
when someone looks at me, and I know that they're not admiring me. They're actually looking at me for a different reason.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think that's something that I've felt more as I've gotten older, about the color of my skin. It's definitely become more apparent as I've gotten
Mm.
older.
Mm.
Definitely. As you both know, I've got a son. His dad is English. To buy a house, you can't buy one in London. So we had to move
Mm.
out to Kent.
Yeah.
And I was really aware, I felt really, really aware. Okay, if I knew how I felt growing up in London, how was my son going to feel growing up outside of London? So luckily we found ourselves in a bit of Kent where there is diversity, but like it's just something that you're really aware of, isn't it? And that you don't want to pass on kind of like your neurosis to your children, but also you want to protect them as much as you can. But yeah, it was really important for us when we moved out of London that we found somewhere with diversity, because we know how that feels. We know how it feels to, like you said, Emma, walk into a room and people be like, oh, you're different, you're new,
Yeah.
and though there is a feeling of kind of alienation, I have to try and find the positive, or it is because people aren't used to that. And it's okay to be intrigued, it's okay to want to ask questions, but it's when
Mm.
you make assumptions, and it's when you're ignorant, and it's when you dehumanize people and you judge people just on the color of their skin or the shape of their eyes. Because the thing is, if you put it's back at the screen and you heard us all talking, you'd be like, oh yeah, they're all Londoners. But then you see
Yeah.
our faces and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, you're Londoners, in a different way. So yeah, I think that's something important to
100%. And again, I can relate to everything both of you have said. When I was growing up, by the way, it wasn't purely Caucasian. It was, I would say, half white Caucasian, and then the other half were probably Asian, as in like Indian, Pakistani, and there was also a black community as well, whereas I was like the only Oriental, not only girl but person, and racism came from everyone. Even so, I agree with you, Amra, like even having had those experiences growing up, it still was London. But then when I moved to Hertfordshire, that was a whole new experience for me. And I remember the first day we didn't have a kitchen set up, so we went to the local cafe, and I will never forget that time when the whole cafe turned around and I just said to my mum, I feel like we're on the set of EastEnders or something, because we were made to feel like aliens. And like you
Yeah.
said, it's not them glancing at you like, oh
No.
my god, she's so exotic. But at the same time,
Mm.
I wouldn't say it was also them wanting to be hostile necessarily. It's just we were so different and perhaps so
Mm.
out of their
Yeah.
comfort zone that they didn't know how to react appropriately. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've been there and I've experienced it too.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy that these experiences that we've had younger, like you said, you've just moved out of Hertfordshire, I've moved to Kent, and it's kind of like you're still feeling that in a way.
Yeah.
And though things have come on, some type ways they haven't, and we're still having that conversation,
Absolutely.
So I think that's really interesting too.
Absolutely.
So, what is our experience of working with Asian clients and their expectations in our professions that we've worked in?
Me personally, when I worked in beauty and was a full-time makeup artist, the only clientele that I really had exposure to were predominantly Chinese customers. And it was always really interesting to see their ideals of beauty. So the key thing was always a foundation shade 10 shades too light. But at the same time, they were like, I really, really want light foundation, but I want it to look natural. But when you have a very, very light foundation, at the same time, it looks like a mask. And if the face isn't the same color as the neck, then literally it looks quite comical. So it was always trying to say, you don't have to be 10 shades too light, and like trying to educate them and say really the way you're going to look the most natural is if you match it with your actual color of your natural skin. And the crazy thing is they were fair already, but they were wanting to go even fairer. So I would have days where I'd be contending with Chinese customers who wanted to be 10 shades too light and teenage English girls that wanted to be 10 shades too dark. So it was always an imbalance.
when I visited some of the makeup counters, like one of my favorite ones is Tom Ford. So I go to Tom Ford, and the lady there, she always says that Oriental people always pick certain shades when it comes to lipsticks. And she'll say, these ones are really popular for Oriental people. And I'll go, why is that, I wonder? And I'm always curious as to see why those colours are popular.
Well, I can answer that for you. It's normally because there is a famous celebrity or a famous blogger in either China or Korea or a Korean K-drama or K-pop, and it's gone viral, and they want that one shade. So that is exactly why it tends to be that one particular shade that they go crazy over.
Yeah, no, I always find that really interesting. Even though I've done some makeup, I haven't had a lot of experience with Asian clients. When I've gone to get shade matched, when I've been in Thailand and I've gone to a makeup counter, they'll always want to match me a couple of shades lighter, like exactly what you said. And I'll go, no, I want my colour. And there's always this sort of battle. So
they assume you want to be lighter,
and I don't. And I'll always say I want to be my colour. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really interesting. So basically those are all the questions for today. It's been a lovely chat.
So I hope you enjoyed our conversation about beauty. Obviously, this is a part 1. There will be further discussions about beauty in the future, and we really hope that you'll be able to join in on the conversation next time. Please let us know down below what your thoughts are on our conversation today. Do you have any similar experiences? Did you have similar experiences growing up in your childhood? We would love to hear from you. Of course, if you're not comfortable, commenting down below on a public forum, then you're more than welcome to email us on beingbrasian@gmail.com. Also, please don't forget that if you do comment down below, or if you'd like to do your own version, then please don't forget to tag us, #BeingBrasianTag.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we want you to be part of our ongoing dialogue. You'll be pleased to hear our next episode will be about food. So we can't wait to hear the delicacies from all your places of origin, and we can't wait to tell you what our favourite foods are. So yes, please comment down below. We would love to hear. So we will see you on the next one, and can't wait to talk about lots of yummy things.